How many of y'all believe that when the Lord got his hand on you, he's got his hands on you? How many of y'all believe that the Lord would give you the desires of your heart? How many of y'all believe that the Lord is all powerful, all knowing, all present? How many of y'all believe that the Lord rose again on the third day with all power, and you have that opportunity to follow with that all power? But you cannot be distracted with these things of the world. See, we have racism going on. We have political debates going on. We have sexual debates going on, whether you're male or female. We have all of these different debates going on in the world that's trying to separate you from the Lord. But you need to pray that he cleanse you of those iniquities. You need to pray that he open your eyes just like Elisha did. He had prayed for his servant to have his eyes open so he could see the Lord was already encamped around him. See, the Lord is already encamped around us, but we have to have the ability to ask of the Lord. That's why we have to remain in prayer so we can allow the Lord's will to be done here on earth as it is in heaven. Even Elijah, when he knew the Lord promised him it was going to rain, he still prayed for rain, because you have to be willing to ask for what the Lord has for you. He has stored these gifts up since the beginning of time. Y'all have to be willing to understand that. But I'm going to tell you about a story from the book of Samuel. In the book of Samuel, the people of Israel, they wanted a king. They wanted a physical king. They wanted a man king, because they was distracted by the distractions that were around them. And that's how Satan works. Satan's like a roaring lion trying to kill, steal, and destroy, and ready to devour anything that stands for the Lord. And if you ain't ready to stand against Satan, you will fall for it. See, the people was like, no, we want a man king. So the Lord sent Samuel back to him and let him know it's going to be ramifications if you choose to want a man king. But if that's the desires of your heart, I will give you the desires of your heart, and I will still protect you. So the Lord had Samuel to anoint Saul, and Saul had a promised bloodline. Saul had the same bloodline as David. See, Jesus could have stemmed from Saul's bloodline, but Saul did not want to keep the commandments of God. But what happened was Saul was very successful in the first year. Coming through the second year, Saul only had about 3,000 soldiers in accountability with him, but he was taking 1,000 here and 2,000 was over there. But what happened was the Philistines had rised up. They had about 30,000 chariots. I don't even want to guess how many soldiers they had if they had 30,000 chariots, but we know they had to man at least 30,000 chariots. All under the guise of Satan, when Samuel told him, we will have to make a sacrifice to the Lord before you go into battle, he said, wait till the seventh day and I will come and make a sacrifice for the Lord, because he had to make the sacrifice, because Samuel was a representation of the Lord here on earth, and that's who the Lord dealt with divinely. That's who the Lord spoke to. But what happened was Saul's people were running for the hills. They were running for the caves. They were hiding anywhere they could hide. They were like roaches until the lights came on. That's why you can't be spiritually blind. But when you're spiritually blind, you don't know no better. Saul called this people because he felt everything was falling apart. See, sometimes with the Lord, it may look like everything's falling apart, but everything's coming together. But that's what you got to understand. So when Saul committed that sacrifice to the Lord, Samuel was coming over the hill. He was disappointed. He let him know, why didn't you keep the Lord's commandments? I told you I was coming. Saul tried to blame him because you wasn't here at your appointed time. See, the Lord don't come on your time. He come on his time. Sometimes it's for your good that he comes on his time. It's for the greater that he comes on his time. But what you got to understand about this story is, even though he came on his time, Saul wasn't willing to wait. See, you got to be willing to wait on the Lord. See, Samuel told him that you had a promise, and now that promise is gone because you wasn't willing to keep the Lord's commandment. So I got to find me another king to anoint that's going to be willing to be after God's heart. See, God set things up and he puts a ball in motion that sometimes we can't see. There was this talented person named David, and he could play the instrument so beautifully because, hallelujah, he was giving praise to the Lord, and he will ward off evil spirits. So sometimes when you find yourself in the bed, sometimes when you find yourself scared, sometimes when you feel that spirit rising up on you, you gotta praise just to get that spirit watered away. And that's what David was good about. He was appointed to be the armor bearer, and he will play his he will play his instrument for Saul when the evil spirit rise up. But sometimes when you let the devil get in, the devil, he works on you. He was working on Saul because Saul had already let him get in, and he was taunting him. And David would play that instrument so beautifully, and that evil spirit would be warded away. But now The little person that nobody looked at had already slayed Goliath. He was building a name for himself. He was slaying soldiers left and right. He was outnumbering whatever Saul did because God had his hand on him. But this young man was after God's heart. You have to understand that when his father sent him in the battle to take his sons, which were not David's sons, his father's sons, some nutrients to continue on the war, he heard this uncircumcised Philistine talking about his God, and he was because he was after his God's own heart. Sometimes you have to be willing to stand for when you hear people standing against your God. That don't mean you got to get rowdy. That don't mean you got to cuss them out, because that's not of God. But what you can do is tap into heaven's command room so you can allow God's will to be fulfilled here on earth as it is in heaven. That's the neat thing about it. But when he heard him, he was offended. See, David may have had some shortcomings. Everybody be like, well, David was with Bathsheba. See, the difference between David and Bathsheba was when the Lord told Saul that he needed to destroy the Amalekites. See, when the Lord told him he needed to destroy Amalek, all of his people, the women, the children, the infants, the animals, no, I'll try to get smart and say, you know what, I'm going to keep this king and I'm going to keep all the good stuff that I think is good, even though the Lord said it's bad. He kept it. So when Samuel came around, he realized what was going on. He said, bring me him right now. And he slayed him right there where he was. Because not only was that, Saul was trying to offer these sacrifices to the Lord, who the Lord had already deemed as not good. He was trying to offer them to him. So that ended the ability for Jesus to stem from his bloodline. Even though the Lord had his hand on Saul, the Lord was willing to support him and give the people the desires of their heart. But now they needed a new king who would be after the Lord's heart, because it's not just a dialogue when you go into prayer. It's a monologue. You have to sit and be willing to listen and wait, because the Lord is constantly talking. He's constantly trying to tell you his plans. He's constantly trying to show you his plans. Sometimes it show you in a dream. Sometimes it show you in a vision. Sometimes it tell you audibly. Sometimes it's that little thing in your spirit that rises up and lets you know this is what the Lord will have for you to do. See, folks, the Lord has his hand on you. He sent this son so you wouldn't have to depend on people like Samuel or people like Elijah. See, even though Elijah heard from the Lord that it was going to rain and the drought would end, Elijah still fell to his knees and he prayed for it to rain. See, the Lord has stored up in abundance before you was ever thought of everything that you would need, but you do have to ask for it. And the only way you can ask for it is be in prayer. But the only way you can provide for his will here on earth as it is in heaven is be in prayer. You're not going to be able to provide for his will just by going to church every day. You got to understand, he even said that the church, my house, will be a house of prayer. Folks, they ain't even praying in the church the way they used to. You got to be able to fall on your knees. Everything is dependent upon prayer. If you want to reach that prosperity that they trying to tell you to send $1,000 with and it's going to turn into that, you better send 1,000 prayers up to the Lord, because the more you appear before the Lord, the better off you are engaged in prayer. The better off you are able to hear and understand his voice. Y'all have a blessed day. I'm going to leave, but I want to leave y'all with something that's going to bless you.